Hey guys, Raymond here with Driveway Fixes. Today we're doing a rear brake pad and rotor change on a 2013 Raptor. So I placed a 4x4 on top of my floor jack and lifted up the rear differential. And then I also put jack stands underneath the ends of the axle directly under the suspension mounting points. You want to keep in mind that anytime you're working under a vehicle, your safety is the #1 priority. You don't want any accidents. So you're going to need a C-clamp or a bar clamp. Additionally, a breaker bar or a lug nut wrench to remove the wheel lugs. Now you will want a 22 millimeter socket on that breaker bar in order to remove the lugs. You're going to need a ratchet with a 1/2 inch and a 3/4 inch socket. It's handy to have a hammer and a flathead screwdriver. I typically use gloves when I do any work on vehicles. I always wear the nitro gloves for additional protection or taking off tires, or for additional grip. I also use like mechanic gloves. You're going to want the brake pads, brake pad hardware, which are the clips in this case. And you're going to want the rotors. Do not include a picture of the rotors in the photo. Now, these are the old rotors. As you can tell, they're very worn and the pads are almost non-existent. So let's get started with the brake job. So you have 4 bolts you need to remove. The first one is this 1/2 inch, which connects the caliper to the caliper bracket. Then you also want to take the 3/4 and remove the caliper bracket. Underneath, you're going to have your 1/2 inch once again for the caliper and the 3/4 for the caliper bracket. Now we're just going to go ahead and take everything apart, change the brakes and rotor. So right here, I'm using my ratchet with the 1/2 inch socket to remove the bolt holding on the caliper to the caliper bracket. Now this can be much faster if you have a air tool, but this channel is aimed to help people, see if they can do their own car repairs without having to spend tons of money and save money in the process. So we're removing the bottom bolt right now that holds the caliper on. Then I'll go ahead and take the caliper. Now you want to be careful. You want to make sure that the caliper is secured after this. You don't want it dangling because the brake line could pop. But I'm going to take the caliper and place it on top of the axle. Now this probably wasn't the best location, but there's always learning that is hindsight's 20/20. So I could have probably secured it better, maybe with a bungee cord. Right now, to get these pads off, you're going to need your flathead screwdriver, and you'll place it in between. If you're watching what I'm doing, I'm going to take the flathead screwdriver and place it in between the brake pad, the worn brake pad, and the rotor. That breaks it free, and then I can just pull it off. Same thing on the back one. Place it in between, couple love taps, and pop it loose. And some of them are more stubborn than others, so that came off right there. Now I'm going to remove the caliper bracket, keeping in mind that I will need a 3/4 inch socket. Take a look at these brake pads. They are worn. You don't want to let them get to this point, because if they do, they start to ruin the rotor. That's the reason I had to replace the rotors and the pads on this vehicle, just because the rotors were ruined. I didn't want to get them returned. I just decided to replace them. So here I'm going to go ahead and take my 3/4 inch socket, take the upper and lower bolts off, and then I can free up the caliper bracket. This part is helpful if you have a breaker bar. I just had the ratchet in my hand, so I just gave it a couple taps to break that bolt free and loosen it up a little bit. Now going down to the lower one, I had quite a bit of difficulty breaking it loose, so I resorted to the breaker bar to kind of free it up. Once again, If you have air tools, that's much easier. They have enough torque, they do the work for you. But once again, this is aimed at driveway fixes, quick and easy, saving money. So use the breaker bar here, broke that one loose. And once I got it broken loose, I went back with the ratchet just to finish up and remove both of the bolts. And if you don't have the tools, just keep in mind it's not that slow. If you have the basic hand tools, I mean, you can do the job. It just will take a couple more minutes. I'd say probably 15 more minutes for a brake job, but it's not going to be the end of the world if you don't have luxury of the huge air compressor and all the high torque air wrenches and everything. Don't worry about it. You can still do the job in your driveway. Don't stress it, and you'll save yourself a lot of money in the long run. So right here, I'm removing the caliper bracket, and we're going to go ahead and make sure that we remember the orientation it goes in. It can't go in a different orientation. You'll see me just make a mental note of the orientation it goes in. As soon as this top bolt is removed, and I'm just going to verify that's the proper orientation, so I have a mental note, so when I come back, I'm not fiddling around with it. Now to remove the rotor, there's a couple things you can do, and sometimes spray WD-40 in the back of the rotor, in between it and the axle, but I'm not going to do that here. I'm just going to take the hammer, give it a couple of taps. Now, since I'm not using this rotor again, and I'm not going to be placing it back in the vehicle just because it's worn and beat up, I feel okay giving it some harder hits just to free it up. If you were reusing this, you want to be a little bit more careful so that you do not put any dents in the rotor, which could cause problems and cause you have to get it returned or buying a new rotor. I'm just going to rotate it and free it up. And at this point, I'm just going to go ahead and pull the rotor on off. And then now we're going to get to the part of putting a new rotor on. All right, so now that I got the old rotor off, we're going to put the new one on. All right, so we're just going to make sure it lines up. And we're going to slide it on. And just make sure it's seated properly. So once this is on, it's pretty much done, and the difficult part is you have to put the pads in the any hardware to hold the pads in, which would be the clips. You do want to make sure that when you ask for the rotor from your parts supplier, if it's the nearby, I don't know, AutoZone, Advanced Auto, O'Reilly's, you want to make sure that they give you the correct rotor as far as the amount of lug that you have on the wheel. So if you have a 6 lug, you want to make sure you get a 6 lug rotor. The Raptor does come in 2 configurations, a 6 lug and 7. Just a heads up, you want to make sure that you ask for the correct one so that you don't get to this point, find out it doesn't fit, and then you have to put everything back together to go back to the store. Right here I'm using the flathead screwdriver to remove the brake pad clips that are on the brake caliper bracket. So remove the first one, just need to line up the new clips just to make sure that they fit properly. Now you don't have to change the clips or most of the hardware normally. I just like to change all the components that are near the component or in contact with the component that I'm changing just to give it overall longevity down the line. So change the first one. Now I'm just going to take the flathead screwdriver and use it to seat the clip properly so that it doesn't move or interfere with the operation of the brakes. So I'm just seating the clip here. And then once you've done one of them, the second one's going to be the exact same. So now I'm just going to pull off the second one. I could have used the screwdriver there, it'd be much easier. Now I'm just going to go ahead and take the new clip and line it up and press it into place. Now these can be a little tricky to press into place. Just try to get one side on first, one corner, and then press it all the way across, and then use the flathead screwdriver to seat it properly so that your brakes function well when you're finished with this whole brake pad and motor change. Just to give it some gentle taps. You don't want to beat it, otherwise it could put dents in the very thin metal of the clips. So now once this is done, we're just going to go ahead and assemble everything else. I'll put the pads on. So right here I am putting on the brake caliper bracket. So I'm going and placing it right on top. And we're going to grab the 3/4 inch bolts I took off earlier. Put the lower one on first. Now there is no need to tighten these up yet. It's a little easier to get the pads on if these are not fully tightened. It allows for some play in the bracket to allow you to wiggle the pads on. I'm going to go ahead and tighten up the top one slightly. Then I'm going to go ahead and take the brake pad and just make sure it's in the correct orientation, going with the curvature of the brake. And it's a matter of just pressing the pad in. Now these can be a little tricky, especially with the clips there. Just a little bit of patience and a little bit of wiggling the pad in will work. So now it's just a matter of me lining up the top and the bottom of the pad clips. And then it's a matter of just pressing the pad in once everything is lined up. There we go. Now I'm going to go ahead and line up the back one and press it in as well. This one went in a little bit easier. I guess I had a little practice on the first one. The second one just pushes in, and that's it. We are done with the pads. Now it's a matter of putting on the brake caliper back on the bracket. So this is I would say the toughest part of changing the rotors and the pads. You'll need to do this even if you just change the pads and not the rotor. You'll need a C-clamp or a bar clamp for this. And pretty much what we're going to be doing is compressing the piston on the brake caliper back into the housing. Otherwise you won't be able to get the caliper back in place and allow you to be able to put those 2 1/2-inch bolts in place. So we're going to take one of the old brake pads. We're going to place it on the front of the piston. We'll take our bar clamp, and I like to use a quick adjust bar clamp because it's a little quicker and easier to adjust the length. And it's just a matter of now tightening it up and slowly compressing that piston back into the cylinder. And this can be a time-consuming process, but just take your time. It will pay off in the end. It'll pay off. Because once this is done, it's a matter of just putting this back on the bracket, and we'll be good to go. And the brake job will be complete. This is the last painful step. So if you notice, I'm going to tighten it all the way into the end, slightly loosen it, and then continue to loosen it all the way. And then I'm going to take the quick adjust and tighten it up a little bit more so that I can continue to press this piston back into the cylinder. And it shouldn't take that many times of resetting it. You just kind of want to hold the front still against the piston and then just tighten it with the handle in the back. So we're almost there. Go ahead and unscrew it one more time, recenter it, and go ahead and tighten it up a little bit more. Sometimes you'll notice the reason I keep retightening it is because it slips off Now that I have it centered in the middle of that area, it won't slip off. When it gets very difficult to turn, this is another reason why I like having mechanic gloves. You can put on those gloves, it gives you a little bit more grip. The rubber ones were starting to slip, so therefore I can take the mechanic gloves and then complete the process of tightening it up, and everything will be compressed so we can get this caliper back on the caliper bracket. And that's pretty much it. The piston should be fully compressed into the cylinder. Alright, so I already put the brake caliper back on the brake caliper bracket. Right now I'm just lining up the caliper with the caliper bracket and making sure that the bolt goes in properly. And I'll go ahead and hand tighten that a little bit. Now, once I complete hand tightening, I'm going to go ahead and grab my ratchet with the 1/2-inch socket. And we're going to go ahead and complete the tightening process. I started with the top bolt, and then I torque it down to kind of like a medium torque. I mean, you don't have to measure it out or anything. This is a feel situation. If you do have a torque wrench, then by all means just check the owner's manual. I went down to the bottom one, tightened that one up, then went back up to the top one just to make sure they were evenly tightened. Now, once you're done with this, you have successfully changed the rotors and the pads on your vehicle. Now, this applies to 2010 to 2014 F-150s. It also includes the Raptor. The one I did today is the Raptor, but it has the same general brake setup on the 2010 to 2014 F-150 generation. Additionally, I just want to thank you guys for tuning in and taking a look at the video. I hope you found it very helpful. If you have any questions or any comments, feel free to leave it in the comment section below. Once again, thank you very much for tuning in to Driveway Fixes. My name is Raymond, and I hope to see you in the next video.